Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode, we bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode, Teagasc Researcher Sarah Woodmartin gives us a monthly update on grassland management. We cover the current grass growth rates and average farm covers, key grazing targets and how to maintain sward quality. We also discuss fertiliser recommendations and the importance of replenishing offtakes. Sarah offers us tips on managing newly reseeded paddocks to get the most out of them, and for those who are managing multispecies swards. We hear now from Sarah.
If we look at figures from, the most recent pasture base, for dry stock farms across the country, we can see average farm covers at around 792 kilos dry matter per hectare, with days ahead sitting at around 20, and growth rates currently around 52 kilos of dry matter per hectare. But as you said, there's huge variation across the country, with, great growth being seen in the north and northwest, while the southern half of the country are looking at, potential feed deficits there, primarily due to that low amount of rainfall they've been receiving.
Certainly, if you look at the soil moisture deficits, there are areas of Carlow into Waterford and that probably have hit drought-type conditions.
Yeah, exactly. While growing conditions have been very favourable, in the northwest, it is very much a tale of two halves. Looking at those counties down there in the southwest, we see very, very little rainfall and, predicted rainfall to come over the next few weeks. There is bits coming here and there, but in general it is quite low, and those soil temperatures are above average. So, until that rain comes to the south of the country, deficits could definitely be a problem.
It's certainly a limiting factor, but in the north and northwest, it's certainly not the limiting factor. Growth rates have been quite high. I suppose if we talk in terms of grazing management, for those in those areas where grass is still powering on, the couple of key things to look at, I'm thinking here in terms of quantity and quality of grass ahead, Sarah. What are our targets?
Yeah, exactly. It's important to say in these years where we have great grass growth, it's great to be able to grow it, but it's how we utilize and manage, those surpluses in the system that's very important. Obviously grazed grass is the most economic feed stuff we can use and provide our sheep and cattle in our pasture-based systems. But we need to provide it to them, at the correct growth stage, not letting covers get too high. And ensure we've good leafy grass ahead of them. So I suppose in terms of pre-grazing covers, we'd be looking to target around, 1,000 to 1,500 kilos dry matter per hectare. And that would be, an approximate pre-grazing height of around 7 to 9 centimetres. And again, say at this time of the year, if you've weaned lambs, ensuring you prioritise those lambs in the system, getting them into covers first, allowing them that good leafy pick of grass, and then you can, your ewes can manage on a maintenance diet this time of year, get them in after to clean out the swards and ensure, fresh regrowth again. So
in terms of post-grazing heights here, we could afford in those wean lamb cases, take them out a bit higher, 5.5 centimetres or so, and let the ewes clean up?
Yeah, exactly. It's important to, do your farm walks and walk through your paddocks, but exactly get those lambs out around 5.5, 6 centimetres, or when you can see very little leaf left in the sward. And those ewes, then you can afford to let them in, they could graze it down to 4.5 centimetres, let them clean out the base of the sward after the lambs have moved on to their next paddock.
In terms of overall supply on those farms, you mentioned the figure earlier, 20 days grazing ahead. What should our target be at the moment, and what would your couple of key recommendations be around that?
Yeah, we're sitting, I think the recommended days ahead for July is around 15 days. So we are ahead. So it's just to keep on top for those areas of the country that have that extra grass, to keep on top of it. And if you have extra grass in the system that is, surplus to your grazing needs, it would be advisable, to cut it. Don't, cut it now, get it out of the system when it's fit to cut. Don't sit and look at it. It's important to get that back into the rotation, into the grazing rotation as quick as possible. So I suppose if you have those extra days ahead, you could look at cutting out paddocks, and saving that as silage.
The drop early, look, you have the benefit of better silage, and we'll have more after grass layer rotation. I suppose
exactly,
if we take the total opposite for those areas that are in drought, the advice is going to be slightly different. What would your couple of key tips be at the moment for those farms?
Yeah, look, for those farms running into their possible deficit periods, there are options there to manage your grass. I suppose firstly it would be important to say you should consult your advisor if you are currently eating into reserves, and you should make a plan going forward to not leave yourself short for the remainder of the year. Then I suppose talking currently, there are options to budget the available grass on the farm. So I suppose if you haven't weaned and you're a mid-season lamb in flock, I suppose we'd advise probably to wean now, to get those lambs weaned, and that way you can let them avail of the best grass. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, those ewes can be tightened up and offered a maintenance diet at this time of year. You could introduce some concentrates at 300 to 500 grams a day, just to ensure there's no feed deficit for those lambs, and ensuring that they maintain that high intake, which will obviously determine your growth rates and their age at slaughter. So keeping those lambs driving on. If grass is low, introduce those bit of concentrates. And then I suppose as well, we could also reduce demand on that grazing platform. So if you've cull ewes to come out of the system post-weaning, get them gone. As soon as you see lambs fit, move them off to slaughter or the mart, wherever your sale output is. And I suppose then another option would be to, send off batches of store lambs for further finishing if you are running into those deficits. And I suppose once you see and feel you're running into those deficits, it's important to act promptly and make your decision before you get into too much difficulty.
Certainly the scenario can change quite quickly. Look, there is the option at the moment of reducing that demand, so that certainly will help. So Sarah, obviously for those farms in drought, fertiliser spread at the moment is not a runner, but for other farms around the country, what should they be considering over the coming weeks?
Yep. So I suppose this stage of the year, we're possibly putting out a slightly lower application of our chemical fertilisers, staggered across the month. So we're probably looking at an application rate of around 12 kilos per hectare at the moment. But I suppose then if you have taken out grass and you need to replenish your P&K stocks, whether that be in the form of slurry, farmyard manure, or if you have an allowance in the form of compound fertilisers.
Just early in this part of the year, we've seen a lot of reseeds going in, and I suppose here the first year for reseed is vitally important. In terms of grazing management on those, what are the couple of key things that farmers need to focus on?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, those reseeds do give great potential to increase your production, especially in that first 2 years of production. So I suppose once you get it established, it's important, to mind it in terms of its management afterwards. So you could graze it initially at low covers of 700 to 1,000 kilos dry matter per hectare. And that's important, to help the grass tiller, creating a good dense sward. It's usually around 6 to 8 weeks, post sowing. But it is very important to, as I said, mind the sward. If grazing conditions deteriorate, ensure not to graze these reseeds and, avoid poaching, take animals out if there's inclement weather forecasts. So I suppose it's one thing to get it established, but it's very, very important to practice good grassland management afterwards in order to create that, that robust sward for the future production years.
And so when we're talking about new swards, we see some multi-species swards going in around the country. You've done a lot of work in this area. In terms of grazing advice on those, what differs there?
Yeah, exactly. So, there's a few questions you need to ask yourself prior to reseeding, like what is the role of your sward and are you open to maybe adding a few different companion forage species alongside your grass? So, they could be in the form, white clover now is really included in your general reseed, but you could go to including the likes of red clover, chicory or plantain, and they do offer great potential, animal performance benefits and sward quality benefits, but they do require different management to a perennial ryegrass only sward. So, it's vital to understand that before you set them in. If you need to very much mind your post-grazing height with these swards. If you overgraze or graze these diverse swards too tight, you're going to damage that growth point in the plant, especially with the likes of your red clover and chicory. And once they get damaged, they're not going to come back. So, they can be damaged obviously by animals overgrazing or also by poaching, waterlogging. So again, similar to other reseeds, if there's bad weather coming, have animals out of those paddocks. Even if they haven't fully grazed them out, they can always go back in. So I suppose, one of your main things there really would be that post-grazing height. Keep it higher than your grass-only sward, at around 5 centimetres, and don't overgraze them, or you'll really hinder their performance.
That's some very useful advice, Sarah. Thanks very much, and look, we'll catch up with you again in the coming months for more grassland advice.
Perfect, thank you.
We'll leave it there for this episode. Thanks, Sarah, again for coming on with some very practical and timely tips at the moment for keeping on top of our grassland management. I have included a link in the show notes for the Grass 10 newsletter where you can get up-to-date weekly information from the programme. That's it for this episode. For updates on our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.